I will just share my screen. So I'm just going to talk a bit about some of the data on military expenditure and arms companies' revenues and profits in Europe in 2022. Now, of course, while there have been significant increases, we're only seeing the start of this, well, or the continuation of this, but the start of the acceleration. We've seen big announcements from like Germany that they're going to have this 100 billion euro fund to spend over however many years, that they're actually going to reach 2% of GDP that NATO requires, which I had previously thought would maybe happen on the 12th of never. And other countries like Italy are also, other major countries are also saying, yes, we are going to make 2% of GDP when they've been well below that in the past. Sweden is aiming for it. So the increases have started, but there is, unless something major changes, a lot more to go. Can you see my screen, by the way?
Yes, we can see it, but can you enlarge it? Like full screen?
Yes, let's do the, there, can you see
Perfect,
that
thanks.
now?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, so coming on to the data, can you see it properly there, or is the Zoom thing getting in the way, which it is for me?
We can see it, it's great.
Good. The total, so I worked out using the CIPRI data, the total military expenditure of all the European countries that are in either the EU and or NATO, as really, especially with the Ukraine war, the EU is becoming, as Letitia said, much more of a military actor. EU and NATO are both clearly allied against Russia, so it makes sense to consider all of these countries together. So the total figure in 2022 was, according to CIPRI, was $346 billion. And if we compare that with Russia at 86.4 billion, it's almost exactly 4 times as much. So again, the question of why Europe needs to be so mortally terrified of Russia and to increase military spending so further, when even not counting all the US forces that are in Europe, the European countries outspend Russia so much. This is about 1.65% of these countries' total GDP in 2022. And it's an increase of 1.9% in real terms compared to 2021. So not a huge amount, but when you consider all the inflation that there's been in Europe in 2022, some of these figures will be provisional. The inflation means actual spending might end up being more than budgeted. So the actual real increase could be more. And it's just, given that a lot of countries have effectively cut real spending in total because of the inflation, the unexpected inflation, it's really quite significant that military spending has increased in real terms at all. And if you compare with the low point in the spending of these countries, which was 2014, obviously an important year, the year of the Russian annexation of Crimea and the, well, really the start of the war in Ukraine, it's an increase of 29.4%. So that's really quite a substantial increase. Just given the top spenders here and what they've been doing, except for Italy, all of them increased in 2022, with the most dramatic one by Poland. If we look at the biggest increases in 2022, we have there Finland, Lithuania, Belgium, Netherlands, Sweden, Poland. 4 of those obviously being ones that neighbour Russia. Belgium and Netherlands, a bit of a surprise, but perhaps it's because they're so much further from the 2% share of GDP than a lot of the others. And this now shows the total spending in real terms in constant dollars of these countries, EU plus European NATO, including Turkey, by the way, between those dates have come out very strange. It is supposed to be from 2010 to 2022. So as you can see, the first 4 years, it's dipping as a result of the austerity programs that were being carried out in the wake of the financial crisis, and then increasing since things kicked off in Ukraine in 2014. And as unfortunately, as we've said, it's likely this is only the start of the increases. I'll now say a bit about the biggest European arms companies. So the CIPRI data for these companies in 2022 is not out yet, but I looked at their annual reports and applied CIPRI's methodology, which used to be a part of my job, so reasonably familiar with it. Generally, it's pretty straightforward, or I could recreate what CIPRI did in 2021 and apply the same methods to 2022, like which divisions to count or whatever. So the total arms sales, I looked at the top 15. There was no data yet for CEA, CAAT, the French nuclear company in 2022. So for the other 14, it was 95.8 billion euros, an increase again of 1.5% in real terms, much higher in nominal terms, but again, very high inflation eroding that. So I've just listed the companies there. I won't read them all out. That should be Rolls-Royce, not Rolls-Royce. If looking at the operating profit of the above, this time there was no figures for MBDA either. It was 17.6 billion euros, and that was a rather whopping increase of 14.3%. So they're doing very well. It's a little bit lower than that if you exclude like the purely civil bits of Airbus and the, well, most of ThyssenKrupp is civil, so it comes to about only 11%, but that's still a very high real increase. The biggest arms sales increases were Airbus and BAE Systems. And I think, was it Stock-Wapenhandel did some, or TNI that did a look at some of the share price data for the top global arms companies, and I did the rest of the European ones. Most of these companies, their shares increase, not all, but most. Some, of course, aren't publicly traded. They're nationalized, like Naval Group or Fincantieri, or owned by other companies like MBDA. But of the ones that are publicly traded, most increased quite a lot. And the biggest increases, Rheinmetall, more than doubling their share price from the beginning of year to the end, not surprising with that juicy 100 billion euros of arms spending promised by the government. Saab 78%, perhaps again impending NATO membership if Erdogan sticks his thumb up, could be a factor there. And then Thales and BAE have both done extremely well. So generally, while not all of the increases are spectacular, we're clearly seeing an upward trend in both military spending and arms industry revenue and profits. And sadly, this only looks likely to continue. So I will finish sharing and I'll stop there.